This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV. Thanks for joining us. As the 2024 presidential race heats up, fundraising is in the focus. Remembering we had an important quarterly deadline on Friday, and now former President Trump tells us he raised over $35 million in the second quarter, despite the legal woes, or maybe because of them. For more, we assembled our political panel. Lisa Camuso-Miller is here, Reset Public Affairs partner, along with Kevin Walling, former Biden campaign surrogate. Great to have you both with us here as we follow the money. Lisa, I wonder if at this stage of the game, because I keep hearing from both of you that it's too early to start relying on national polls. Real people don't answer pollsters anyway. Should we be following the money as a metric at this stage of the race more than polling data?
Oh, it's so interesting that you ask that, Joe, because that's exactly what my point of view is on these numbers, is that if the polling is not reflective in the money raising, then maybe that is a better indicator for us as to how a candidate is appealing to the electorate.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Kevin, what does $20 million for Ron DeSantis say then? Less than Trump, sure, but that's not a small number.
Not a small number. These guys are raising significant amounts early on. The other interesting dynamic I think that is going to play out in 2024 is the fact that you have so many billionaires backing one candidate and supporting these outside groups. So Ron DeSantis has this never back down group that's raised more money than the hard side of the campaign, is hiring field staff. And again, this is going to be a new dynamic that we haven't seen play out in a presidential election before.
So is that a liability? Because it's all about small donors, right? Donald Trump can tell you today that his average donation was, I believe, $34.20, as opposed to three billionaires sitting down and giving you $20 billion. And we don't know that 20 million, if that's the way it went down. But there is a question about small donors, including the debate criteria for next month.
There is an important debate criteria that requires that there be a certain amount of small donors that give. The other thing, too, is that it tells me that if Donald Trump has all of these small donors, then maybe this is where that sentiment that he's tapping into, people that are generally unhappy, is really coming online, whereas Ron DeSantis perhaps hasn't necessarily crossed over that line with those smaller donors, but he's certainly giving himself an opportunity to really build a good campaign and actually have a good ground game against the front runner.
And of course, the campaign at the end of the day is who the candidate is surrounded by, right? It's not just the base or the voters. It's also who's helping you set the policy and set the strategy. And for former President Trump, a former campaign advisor of his was actually on Bloomberg earlier today speaking with our very own David Weston, who suggested that maybe this time around it's going to be a no from him. Here's Tom Barrack.
If called upon, will you advise Donald Trump as candidate again the way you did last time?
No. I have great respect for him as a friend always. I have great respect for the President of the United States. It's a dangerous game.
So, Lisa, does it matter who the former president is surrounding himself with so long as the base and the grassroots donors are there?
I'm not necessarily sure, Kailey. And the reason why I say that is because for so long he has been surrounded by not necessarily anyone who's ever run national campaigns before, because all of those names that we recognize that are, by the way, with candidates now that are in the 24 race are not with Donald Trump. So he himself is obviously the one that is driving the campaign, driving the messaging. No one tells Donald Trump what to do. Donald Trump tells himself what to do. So I'm not necessarily sure for him that matters. Certainly for the other candidates, though, that absolutely does.
Joe Biden's driving around in the middle of all this through South Carolina today, selling Bidenomics, as Wall Street says no thanks, based on what we're seeing in the action here. And the approval ratings have been stubborn, and we've talked about that before. Does he just keep hammering home the same message? He said, earlier today, thank Bidenomics for this job market. He's probably going to get a fat number tomorrow. Or does this require a little more nuance from Joe Biden?
Well, I think it requires a lot of cheerleading that you're seeing coming out of this administration and the president. They're going to go on the tour this entire summer, touting the benefits of some of these packages that they've passed in terms of infrastructure, chips, and manufacturing. And I think that's something that rallies individual communities. Whenever he goes to a town, that leading newspaper has coverage of that rally, coverage of that event. That has a significant effect, I think, in terms of local communities looking at this president. I think there's a lag time between when these policies kick in, right? So we're just seeing the price of insulin come down, for example, in terms of the last 6 months. I think there's that lag time in terms of where people are at polling-wise and where this president will be come Election Day.
So it comes back to the do we trust the polling kind of question.
That's right.
And I guess also the question, Kevin, of will people potentially vote for a second term Biden just because they don't want another term for Trump? That ultimately approval doesn't actually matter because, as the president himself has said, compare me to the alternative.
Certainly, and I think that's the hoped-for outcome of this Democrat. To Lisa's point in terms of Trump not surrounding himself with professional campaign people, the more he's out saying what he is saying, the more the process plays out on the judicial level, the more I want to run against the former president, because in 2020, more people went to the polls, I think, as a response to Donald Trump and not necessarily excitement about Joe Biden.
Of course, we don't know who he's going to be running against. We don't even know who's going to be on the debate stage next month. Getting back to that issue of criteria, there's also the pledge. Will you pledge to support the Republican nominee no matter who wins? About half the field has already said no to that, including some establishment Republicans, I think we can call, like Asa Hutchinson. Mike Pence today was asked about pardoning Donald Trump if he were to be elected president, said he would consider it. Is that the right move for him as he tries to differentiate himself from his old boss?
No, but I think what he's trying to do is he's trying to appeal to that core set of 30% voters that have said that they would go with Trump. Mm-hmm. And they're going to go with Trump regardless. It doesn't matter if they're going to pardon him. They don't believe that Donald Trump should be pardoned because they don't believe Donald Trump is guilty.
So he should have said no.
Yes, but I'm not sure that Mike Pence has really he hasn't really thread the needle just yet. He's really trying to do it. I mean, he's the guy who arrives on the scene in Ukraine. He's the guy that's riding a motorcycle at Joni Ernst's event in Iowa.
On that Harley.
I mean, he's looking for all of these remarkable opportunities for himself. He's really trying to thread the needle. And I think today he thought that was the right thing to do. But how do you appeal to the 30% voters that support Donald Trump that already don't think that he's guilty? By saying that, I think that actually could hurt him with that set of voters.
Well, it's a matter of finding a lane for all of the different Republicans who aren't Trump. And of course, we're operating under the assumption here, Kevin, that there's only one real Democrat in the race, or at least who is actually in contention. But that's not true. RFK raised $3 million in a 3-day period. Are we underappreciating the risk that he could pose to Biden's reelection efforts?
Certainly, I think we've underappreciated the extent to which Robert Kennedy is getting in the media, getting this attention, and we should take nothing for granted. The president stands at 82% approval among Democrats. The nomination is his. He has a record, as I said before, to run on. And I think you're going to see between Bobby Kennedy Jr. And Marianne Williamson, they're generally also rants. But to Lisa's point on the Mike Pence lane, he's making a strong play for Iowa. That's a hugely important state when it comes to evangelicals. And I think that potentially might be the upset for Mike Pence in Iowa. Same with Tim Scott. That can appeal to those voters. But then, of course, we head to New Hampshire with our former governor, Chris Christie.
Are Democrats reluctant to say RFK, to use the initials, because it reminds them of another RFK? They want people to know that this is not the Kennedy they might be thinking of?
Well, it's actually an interesting point. And you look at some of those polling, I think a lot of those numbers are either, generally wanting someone besides Joe Biden. I was a surrogate for the president, and hearkening back to the Kennedy allure. And when, over the last 3 months, we've learned more and more about Bobby Kennedy Jr.'s views, his polling has actually come down.
But you call them Robert now and Bobby Kennedy.
I go back. I loved his dad.
Yeah.
RFK, Bobby Kennedy.
All right.
His close friends called him Bob, actually, Bob Kennedy. So in the AG's office.
These are some of the unspoken things I just need to ask about.
As I said, RFK. Because, it's shorthand. We're short on time.
That's
this is a television show, and it's going to continue coming up. We'll be back with our political panel to discuss how AI might change the game for the campaign in 2024. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV.
Hi, I'm AI Francis Suarez. You've probably heard that my namesake, conservative Miami Mayor Francis Suarez, is running for president. I'm here to answer questions you may have about Mayor Suarez's proven agenda for economic prosperity, cutting spending, and supporting our police. So how can I help?
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV, and we're in the 2024 election cycle. So yes, that was Miami Mayor Francis Suarez, or an AI version of him, The candidate launched an AI chatbot as part of his 2024 campaign. For more, let's welcome back our political panel, Lisa Camuso-Miller, Reset Public Affairs partner, and Kevin Walling, former Biden campaign surrogate. So, Lisa, this is where we are now. The future is here. All candidates are actually bots. I mean, does this work?
In the last segment, we talked about fundraising. I'm going to guess the mayor has not done well. And this is his way of combating some of that. I'm certain that we're going to see more AI. I mean, Kevin has obviously heard a lot about this on his side of the aisle. It's a big discussion. But also, it's a little creepy. It's just a little creepy to see.
Can't imagine why you would say that.
No.
Look, we're wondering when the AI version of the show anchors show up. You won't have to put up with us anymore.
Never. No one can replace you two.
Right,
Get out of
course. Problem is, it doesn't work very well.
Yeah.
We took it for a spin, a little test drive on Bloomberg Radio. I asked them a lot of questions, and it's like 3 stock answers that it kept spitting back at me. If you're going to go there, is it enough to just get us talking about them, or does it actually have to work?
Well, listen, I think Francis Suarez, to Lisa's point, is trying to break out in some capacity. He's already fumbled out of the gate, both with his announcement and follow-up questions. So I think he's trying to flip the script a little bit and use this as a way to talk about generational change, probably, in terms of, he's running against a 77-year-old Donald Trump and 80-year-old Joe Biden, and that's maybe one way to cut through the noise with this, but it's certainly not ready for prime time, to your point.
Well, and to that end, obviously, this doesn't seem like it works perfectly. And yet there is some AI created stuff out there that looks authentic, that is actually hard to decipher whether or not it is real, which just raises the question about the reception of information in this election cycle. And frankly, Kevin, what we can trust and what we can't. It's going to be very difficult.
I think you're absolutely right, Kailey. And, this is a brave new world with these deep fakes and things like that. There's been some doctored videos of Joe Biden making presidential announcements and things like that. And we're going to have to be even more vigilant in terms of policing this. Responding immediately when things like that get out there. You have some influencers like Donald Trump Jr., others that love to retweet a lot of these deep fakes. And it's going to be certainly problematic for, I think, this country heading into this election cycle.
The RNC has been dabbling in this, Lisa. You were communications director for the RNC. Would you have gone there knowing that this cuts both ways?
The way that we used to assess how to handle things like this would be, does the risk outweigh the reward? And certainly, to me, the risk in this case way outweighs it. So there is typically the RNC and the political parties don't get into the game. They don't tweet one over another and that kind of thing until the primary has been decided and the nominee is known. So that alone is different. But it is also, Kevin said it, it's a brave new world. So perhaps sharing all of that information is the way that they're going about their way of doing that.
It has gotten to the point, Kailey, where the deep fakes look so real that you have to assume people are believing a lot of this is fact.
Yeah, absolutely, which just kind of raises the misinformation, disinformation point, especially in the wake of a court decision just days ago, which said that the government can't be as involved with social media companies when it comes to getting some of that content taken down. A challenge of this election cycle, surely.
This is not the end of this one.
No.
We'll be very curious to see what kind of stuff they're coming up with by the time we're in a general election. Many thanks to our political panelists, Lisa Camuso-Miller and Kevin Walling, always the best here on Bloomberg. Check out the Washington Edition newsletter on the terminal and online.
It is written by real Bloomberg journalists, not AI bots, I can confirm. Thank you so much for joining us on Balance of Power this evening. We'll see you back tomorrow. This is Bloomberg.